Okay, so it is on. Court action has been submitted. So first of all, thank you to my members particularly, and anyone who's subscribed. And if you want to see what happens next with this court action, don't forget to subscribe. Since I first started doing these videos about the battery lease and the issues, people have told me about a couple of interesting cases, which I'll talk about once we finish talking about this car. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a little while. So first of all, this car. So what's going on with this? So this is a Renault Zoe 2016. I own the car. I bought it off a customer. I'm an EV mechanic, but the battery is leased. So there's a finance agreement and I pay a monthly amount to Renault Finance, Mobilize they're called, for the battery. Okay, so the battery is theirs. The car's got a couple of faults. One of them I know how to fix, but it's quite a long job. The other one is a bit of a weird one, and I'm a bit concerned if I do the long job, the car's still going to have another fault. It's also not in a great condition, so I want to scrap it, okay? And it's mine, so I can do what I want with it, right? Apart from the battery, which obviously is not mine, that belongs to the finance company, so I want to return it and end the lease. Give them back what's theirs. Seems simple enough. So I've been attempting to give this battery back. So there is a process. Basically, when you have these leased batteries, there's 3 ways you can get out of this, okay? So, and some people have suggested just stop paying your direct debit, but that's going to ruin the credit agreement, ruin my credit rating, because I have a credit agreement with Mobilize, okay? So the proper ways to get out of this is you sell the car and transfer it to someone else, okay? Well, this car's faulty and I don't want to sell it, okay? So that's not viable. You can buy out the battery. That's just over £2,000. The battery's worth 500 quid and I don't want it. You know, I want to do the other option, which is to give the battery back and end the lease. Seems simple enough. I rent some goods, I lease them, whatever, I want to give them back. Fine. Much like if you had a rented car, you give it back and then you stop paying. Simple enough. Okay. So the process to return the battery is that it goes back to a Renault dealership. So basically back where it came from. There have to be a particular ZE dealership so they can deal with electric cars, okay, fine. And they raise the request and there's a special courier takes it back to the stocking centre, whatever. They do whatever they want with it, but I stopped paying for it because they've got it back. So Mobilize, who are the finance company, sent me this process and said, here's what you need to do, raise it with your local dealer. So my local dealer has absolutely no idea what to do with this. None of the people working there have any understanding of this process. The service advisor doesn't know what to do. In the end, I was talking to the parts guy. He's got no idea. Spoke to his manager. Wasn't really sure. Gave me a call to find out a bit more information about, why don't you just sell it? I'm like, well, it's faulty. I want to give it back. Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, makes sense. We'll get back to you. They don't get back to you. So I've explained to the battery finance company that I want to give it back, but my local dealership doesn't know what to do. They don't understand the process. Nobody knows what to do. So they basically just came back and said, oh yeah, no, they'll know what to do. They need to raise a request on the system and blah, blah, blah. But as many times as I tell the battery finance company, they don't know what to do. They can't give me a price. They don't understand this process. They don't accept that. They just keep saying, you know, use this dealer lookup to find your local dealer and return the battery. But it's just not happening, basically. So I have a contract which says I can return the battery, but it's not possible. The contractual terms are not being fulfilled by the finance company. Effectively, what's happening here is they're relying on an uninterested third party, the dealer, because I've not got a contract with the dealer, I've got a contract with the finance company, but they don't physically handle the battery. They leave that up to somebody else, but that somebody else doesn't know what to do and doesn't care because they're not involved at all. So effectively, the finance company are not fulfilling the terms because they're not providing that route to hand the battery back. And as many times as they tell me to talk to my local dealer, it's no use. I've also spoken to Renault to Renault Central Customer Services to explain this, and they're very sorry. And they try and talk to the local dealer, but it just doesn't work. The process doesn't work. And there are lots of things about this battery finance process which just haven't been thought out. So I told Mobilize that I was going to take them to court. And I'm going to take them to court for the 2,000 battery buyout price, like aircraft. And when I receive that from them, I'll pay it back to them to end the lease because I don't want it. You know, the battery's worth about 500 quid. I don't want to buy it. I want to give it back to them. Simple enough. So as many times as I called Mobilize and sent them a letter before action and all that kind of stuff, they just parroted out the same old thing, which was, you can return the battery to a dealer, but it's got to be agreed, talk to your local dealer. It's like, well, the process doesn't work, okay? You're not living up to your contractual terms, you're relying on a third party, and they don't care. time's up. So it's been a little while since I've done an update, because basically I submitted the letter before action and we've been just giving them due time to respond, and keep calling them and bugging them and saying, what are you going to do about this? And they're not going to do anything about it, basically. So we submitted court action. So what's happened is I've raised a court claim, a small claims court, which is very simple to do. So claim was issued against Mobilize Financial Services. The defendant gets a month to respond. So these claims are really easy to raise. You basically just detail what happened with a bit of a timeline and a bit of a description. Really, really simple. Put in all the details, and obviously your details, defendant's details. There's a different fee depending on how much it is, but I've taken someone to court before, so it's not really difficult. And you submit the claim, and so Mobilize have a month to respond. If they don't respond, I win. Basically, that's what happens. So, and then I get a default judgment and I can enforce that against them. They can respond and they can say, we acknowledge this, but we don't agree with it, and it can go to court. So they could do that. They could say, okay, we acknowledge this has been received, but we don't agree with what's in here. We don't think we're liable for this money. And, you know, the court can decide, which is also fine, because I've basically got nothing to lose. I don't mind taking a day off and going to court and explaining it, whatever. Not really a problem to me. I don't think they're going to want it to go to court, because I don't think that's going to look very good. The other option is they could try and negotiate. So they could offer me a reduced buyout. So they could say, well, you can buy the battery for £1,000, and I'll say I still don't want it because it's not worth it. It's worth 500 quid. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. If they offer me a buyout for 500 quid, I'll just say, yep, here's the 500 quid. And then I'll just stick it on eBay or whatever, use it for parts. I don't know, use it as a test car. Who knows, whatever. But it will be interesting to see what happens. So they've got a month to reply. So this is going to take a little bit of time, but we've got to go through the process, and it's going to be really interesting. I have to say a big thank you to all the people who filled in my form. Lots of people doing buyouts because they just can't go through the process of returning the battery. So lots of people being pushed into a corner by a big company, and I think it's time's up, really. So yeah, the process is quite simple. I printed out my claim as well. So one moment. So yeah, it's just got all your details and then just like a reason, basically. So, you know, I should be able to return it, but I can't. So you just detail your claim, and then you detail, basically, there's like, you put in a date and a thing that happened. So it's really, really simple. And you just go through it, submit it, pay your fee, and it's in. And I think they probably didn't think I was actually serious and actually going to take them to court, but sorry, Renault Finance, I have, and we will see what happens. Yeah, so let me know in the comments what you think. I don't think they'll just write it off. I'm somewhere between, they'll either offer me a cheap buyout or they'll just let it go to court. I don't think they want to let it go to court. Probably cheap buyout is probably the thing that's going to happen. We will see. Or maybe they pressure the local dealership. See, they could lean on the local dealership to facilitate the return, but the court action started. So unless they do that quickly and to sort of in a manner, sort of price to return the battery that I'm happy with, then that's not going to be acceptable to me. And if it's not acceptable to me, then the court action continues, because now we're in this process. Because returning the battery, there is quite a significant fee with doing that, usually to the tune of about £1,400. So, which I think is completely unreasonable, which is another story, because that's not mentioned in the contract. So where I thought we would be at this point is that the dealer would have engaged with me, given me a cost to buy it out, and then we've been in negotiations with Mobilize about the fact that this is unfair terms, unfair fees that are not mentioned in the contract. All these contracts are regulated. This is a consumer contract, and there are finance laws, but basically Mobilize just do whatever they want. So that's going to stop now. So we shall see what happens. I will let you know as when anything happens. So the other cases that people have told me about, so there are other vehicles other than Zoes which have leased batteries. So Renault Kangoo was one. So the early Kangoo, the 22 kilowatt hour, shares the same battery cells as the Nissan Leaf 24 kilowatt hour, and those cells are no longer manufactured. but lots of Kangoos were sold with a leased battery. And this is where the kind of issues come in. Some of the leased batteries, so there's like an ongoing warranty on this battery, so if it becomes faulty, then you can get it repaired, or they'll give you a better one, a newer one, whatever. But with the Kangoo, they don't make the old ones anymore. So if there's a fault, they actually have to fit the bigger battery, which is 33 kilowatt hours in the case of the Kangoo. And so it costs them quite a lot of money, basically. So they don't really want to do it. So Kangoos, people have been getting buyout prices of £1 because Renault just want to get out of their liability because they have to fit a brand new or reconditioned bigger battery, which they don't want to do, basically. So it's a liability. Similarly with the Renault Twizy, they don't make those batteries either. And so people have been getting cheap buyouts on them, but then the batteries are effectively no good. They're worn out, and you've been paying to lease it every month. And a Twizy is kind of quite a small two-seat, like two-door small quadricycle thing. And you don't really use those during the winter months, so the batteries tend to suffer quite a lot. They're not very big anyway. And they haven't got any new ones. There's none on the shelf. Even if there was one on the shelf, it's been there so long it'd be no good anyway. And they don't make new ones, so they can't supply new cells for these vehicles. So no new batteries. What do? Well, they just want to get rid of the lease liability. Okay, interesting. Similar situation with the Fluence, and I actually had to do an expert submission for someone else's court case to give basically my technical opinion as a sort of specialist EV mechanic as to the condition of a battery and the effect on the vehicle of that battery being in a degraded state, because basically the range is really poor. The car's about 10 years old or older, and the battery's in a poor state, but Renault basically said, we haven't got another battery, but you can buy it out for this much. And the customer's like, but I've literally been paying you every month so that when it goes wrong, you'll fix it. And when it gets to that point, you can't. And that's one of the flaws of the system. What's about having an insurance policy that when you go to claim, they say, oh, we can't fulfill our end of the bargain. If I can't fulfill my end of the bargain, then I get absolutely ruined. I get charged, cost me a fortune, ruin my credit rating, etc., etc. But when they can't fulfill it, they just do whatever they want, basically, and you can't negotiate. So he's taking them to court to get a better outcome in that case. And I should drop him a note, actually, because that was a couple of months ago. He was putting his submissions into court, but sort of not a small claims court like I'm doing, kind of big court. So it might take a bit longer. Another interesting one was a car I had here recently. I referred to it in a previous video. So it was a Zoe, a little bit older than this, in a poor condition, and the guy said that it had a battery lease, but he also mentioned it had been written off. And I said, well, that's really weird, because when it gets written off, effectively the ownership passes to the insurance company, and then they can dispose of it, and sometimes you buy it back, sometimes it gets auctioned. So if a car has finance and gets written off, which effectively these have finance, battery lease finance agreement, then that finance should be paid off or the battery given back to end it. It can be either way, basically. So if your Zoe with a lease battery is involved in an accident, the insurance company have two options. They can take it to Renault to return the battery. Renault will inspect it, and if there's like a dent in the battery or anything, any damage, they don't want it, basically. It just gets scrapped because they can't transport it with a dent. Makes sense. Big lithium battery. Or they can just buy it out. So the insurance company pays off the battery finance, and then you get what's left. So one of those two things should happen. But in the case of this guy's car, the insurance basically just gave the owner all the money. It didn't sort out the battery finance, which is really dodgy, because the car then got written off but still had an existing finance agreement. And then basically the guy's car had a fault, and I fixed it for him, which was fine. Charging fault, it's all good. It was the previous Renault Zoe battery charge impossible 5 AM charging fault, previous video, which is fine. So fixed that guy's car, and I spoke to Renault Finance and said to them, this is written off. Isn't that a bit of a problem? And they just basically parroted out the same old stuff. The people you talk to on the phone are really not empowered to make any decisions or discuss anything properly. But I encouraged the guy to talk to Mobilize as well himself, because as the owner he might be able to speak with a bit more authority on it, which he did, but nothing really happened. Basically they just parroted out the same old, if you want to buy it out it'll cost X much. subsequent to that, the guy got an email. I spoke to him a week or so ago, and it was from Mobilize that said, oh, if you want to buy your battery, you can buy it for £230. And the buyout would be, on that age, slightly older than this, so probably in the region of about £1,600 would be the sort of book price they would give you. And yeah, so I think Mobilize realised this process had really fallen apart and gone wrong, and they were effectively warrantying a battery in a car that had been in an accident, which is not something they want to do, because if the batteries had been dented, they're still liable to repair it when it's got a dent in it. So he got a buyout at sort of just over £200, which I advised him to go ahead with. So he'll have a battery-owned car, which is good for him. His car's okay. A little bit tatty, but it works. It needs a bit of tidying up. But yeah, it's all good. Daniel's old Zoe. And yeah, that just highlights where this process totally falls apart. Other people have contacted me and said, oh, I traded my car in, even traded it into a dealer, gave them the paperwork, but they didn't fill it in. The dealer doesn't care. They don't want to start paying for it. So you have the liability. You're still paying monthly for this battery, and you have to keep paying until someone else fills in the paperwork. And on the flip side, other people have bought cars, let's say from auction or whatever, places like that, and it's actually been a leased battery, but the auction house hasn't done anything about it. They don't care. It's just a car, goes under the hammer, someone buys it, whatever, change of ownership, V5, job done for them. Whereas realistically, playing game right, realistically someone is still paying for that lease. Someone is paying monthly. They're on the hook for it, and if they stop paying, their credit rating is ruined because they're liable for it, but they haven't got it anymore. And you're not, when you sell one of these, you're not supposed to release it until the lease has been transferred. And it's like a two-stage process. There's an application form, you send it in, and then they do a credit check and send you the full agreement to sign and send back. So there's like a two-stage process, because I've sold these a few times and it's a pain in the backside basically, and you're not supposed to hand over the car until the second stage is complete. If you trade it in, you just give them the paperwork and presume they're going to handle it. Sometimes they don't, and there are so many loopholes with this system, it's unreal. What they really should just do is offer reasonable buyouts and just get out of it basically. But I think they're just creaming it off of all these old batteries. That these Zoe batteries do last really well, so they're probably just creaming it in every month, and they don't care, because you've got a finance agreement, it's in your name, it's all signed, and you have to keep paying or your credit rating gets ruined. So they don't care. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. We will let this roll. I will let you know if Renault respond, Renault Finance, and what happens and what they say. It will be very interesting. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for listening. Cheers.